I don't know, for anyone that doesn't know Azzam Tamimi, he's a Palestinian academic and is member of the Stop the War, prominent member of Stop the War, and comes from London, is director of the Institute of Islamic Political Thought, and he's written various books. One of them talks about the resistance in Palestine. I have heard Azzam Tamimi from 2001, that's when I started to get involved, but I'm sure he talked much more before then. But I think it's a pleasure for us to have him here. We are a campaign that campaigns for human rights for all. Azzam Tamimi does so. And he will talk for about half an hour, and then we will open up to discussion. He needs to leave around 1 o'clock, maybe a wee bit later than 1 o'clock, to catch a train for Glasgow. So,
thank you very much, and I must commend the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign for the work they're doing. As you heard, this function had actually been planned long before the war started, and now it is an irony that we talk about the Holocaust Memorial when we've just seen a Holocaust of another type perpetrated by those who claim to be speaking in the name of the Holocaust survivors. Now, the Holocaust is a fact of history, and those who deny the Holocaust deny a fact of history, deny that one of the most vicious crimes in the history of humanity was perpetrated against the Jews in Europe, against many other groups and communities as well. But the Jews were particularly targeted for a number of reasons that are probably known to many of you. There are two types of people who deny the Holocaust. There's first the anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, racist sort of mentality. They deny the Holocaust because they are simply anti-Jewish. But there is another type of denial of the Holocaust, and that is a reaction to a political reality. Much of the Holocaust denial in Arab and Muslim circles, for instance, is simply a reaction to the existence of Israel and to the crimes that Israel has been perpetrating. And if you go back a little bit in history, you'll be surprised to discover that until the Zionist project started taking form, Jews, Muslims and Christians lived in much of the Muslim world in peace and harmony. The Jews were our neighbors, just like the Christians were our neighbors. There were Jewish communities throughout the Arab world that spoke Arabic, that were considered to be Arab Jews. Just like there were Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, there were Arab Jews. It is the Zionist project and the determination on the part of the superpowers after the First World War to create a Jewish state in Palestine in order to solve a problem that existed in Europe until then, that brought a backlash. And you read about this in much detail in my book, in the chapter in which I criticize Hamas charter, and I call for a rewriting of the charter, because in my opinion what was mentioned in the Hamas charter that had some sort of implicit denial of the Holocaust, or probably not denial, but belittling of the Holocaust as a crime, as an event, and as well some echoing of the anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic sentiments that existed in Europe. Actually, this was translated into Arab literature during the height of Arab nationalism, and became widespread within Arab intellectual circles, and later on even Muslim circles. I remember I was invited once to Pakistan to give a series of talks, and in Karachi someone approached me and presented me with a copy of the document or the book known as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And he boasted that he did this for the Palestinian cause. And I said to him, I regret to inform you that you are doing a great deal of harm to the Palestinian cause, because this is a fake document. It shouldn't be relied on, and much of what is in it doesn't make sense, it's not true, etc. So, as we talk about Holocaust Memorial, it should be known that we do not deny the Holocaust. We don't even oppose a memorial for the Holocaust that existed in Europe. But all we want is for the Holocaust not to be exploited by those who are today implementing a Holocaust against the Palestinians. This is the idea. And as Finkelstein said, there has been an industry to exploit the Holocaust and the suffering of the people of the Holocaust in order to serve Zionism. And I remember what Ezra al-Shahak wrote in his masterpiece in which he said that until 1939 there was actually communication and collaboration between Nazis and Zionists in Europe, because both wanted the Jews out of Europe. And until then, until the Holocaust was perpetrated, the majority of the Jews in Europe were not convinced by the Zionist claims and the Zionist slogans. This is what we want the world to understand. And I, as a Muslim, I cannot be anti-Jewish. I cannot be anti-Semite, because I am a Semite myself. And I cannot be anti-Jewish because the Jews are the people of the book in my doctrine. And they have rights, and they have to be respected. And we have a whole history of peaceful coexistence between us and them. But as a victim of Israel and as a victim of Zionism, I have every right to be opposed to Israel and opposed to Zionism. And I think people who are defending justice, defending truth, and defending freedom should see Zionism in the same way they saw apartheid before. Zionism is even a much worse form than apartheid was in South Africa. Now, this is what I wanted to say by way of introduction. Now, because of the events that happened recently in Palestine, something must be mentioned about what has happened and what this is likely to lead to. Now, first of all, the war that Israel waged against the Palestinians in Gaza, as we know from the Israeli press now, was planned at exactly the same time that Israel entered into a truce arrangement with Hamas. A truce arrangement brokered by the Egyptians. And I regret to say that the Egyptians have been the most dishonest of brokers. I even hear from Israeli sources that some Israelis are unhappy with the role that the Egyptians have played. Because the Egyptians had their own interests in all of this. They were not just mediating between two opponents to find a middle way. The Egyptians were spoiling much of what could have become solid arrangements, whether it had to do with Shalit and the exchange of prisoners, or whether it had to do with a truce between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And you can really write a voluminous book about what the Egyptians have been doing in this regard. Now, the Egyptians knew right from the beginning the intentions of the Israelis. Not only knew, the Egyptians were not simply accomplices. The Egyptians were part and parcel of the war on Gaza.